In the late afternoon hours of August 21st, 2016, 5-year-old Alayna Ertl of Watkins, Minnesota was playing outside her home. The sun had just begun to set, casting a soft, golden light across the small neighborhood. To anyone watching, it would have appeared to be an ordinary evening like so many others. Alayna had been playing with her little brother and their dog, but in the blink of an eye, she vanished without a trace. It wasn't a chaotic disappearance. No loud noises, no broken windows, no frantic calls for help. Instead, it was as though Alayna had simply disappeared into thin air. A child, one who had been so full of life just moments before, was gone, and no one saw a thing. Alayna had always been a lively child, cheerful, curious, and deeply loved by her family. Alayna, like most kids her age, was a bundle of energy, laughing, playing, and obliviously enjoying the morning. Her parents, Matt Ertl and Trina Clegg, described her as energetic, playful, and always willing to help. She had a soft spot for animals, often playing with the family dog, and she had a fondness for stories. She loved school and was a bright student who enjoyed being around her friends. But on August 21st, 2016, Alayna would not return home from her usual playtime. When her mother, Trina, realized Alayna was nowhere to be found, she started searching the house. No sign of her daughter. Trina called out for her, then ventured outside to search the yard. Matt joined in, and a frantic search ensued. Still, no trace of the 5-year-old. It didn't make sense. Alayna had been right outside, playing with her brother, and now she was gone. No one had seen her leave. No one had heard anything unusual. She had simply vanished. This wasn't just a child who wandered away. There was no explanation. By the time Matt and Trina realized their daughter was gone, concern quickly turned to panic. Alayna had not just disappeared, she had been taken. The police were immediately contacted. What had started as a simple missing child report rapidly escalated into a full-scale search. Law enforcement, including sheriffs, officers, and volunteers, scoured the neighborhood and nearby wooded areas. Search dogs were deployed. Helicopters were dispatched to search from above.
Over.
But hours passed, and still, there was no sign of Alayna.
Negative contact, air support.
No clothing,
We're losing
no
life
personal
in the woods.
belongings, no trail. Search teams expanded their search efforts, combing through thick brush, wooded areas, and nearby creeks, trying to find anything that could lead them to the missing child. Yet, with each passing hour, the search seemed more and more futile. The longer she remained missing, the more likely it seemed that someone had taken her. The first breakthrough came days later when Alayna's body was discovered in a neighbor's shed on the outskirts of town. The details surrounding her discovery were chilling, to say the least. She had been strangled, and evidence suggested that her body had been hidden after the crime. At that moment, the missing child case had evolved into a murder investigation. As authorities delved deeper into the case, a multitude of questions began to arise. Who took Alayna? What were their motivations? Why did no one see anything suspicious that day? The investigation shifted from searching the area for clues to investigating the people closest to her. The first suspects were Alayna's family members, but there were no immediate charges filed. Theories swirled, but the answers remained elusive. The details were sparse, and the physical evidence was hard to come by. In the early days of the investigation, it seemed clear that Alayna had been abducted, but how and why were still up in the air. Through interviews, authorities were able to piece together a clearer timeline. Alayna's parents had been involved in their own intense search efforts, but as the investigation continued, their involvement came under scrutiny. Questions surrounding the family's actions began to arise. Had Matt and Trina missed something? Has someone in the family known more than they were saying? Could it be possible that the family's situation wasn't as simple as they made it seem? As the investigation progressed, attention turned to the system, to how Alayna was known to the authorities. She had been a known child to the system, having been part of welfare and child services investigations in the past. There were reports that, despite all the system's mechanisms for child protection, no one had seen the warning signs. Alayna Ertl, like many children in vulnerable situations, became part of the system early on in her life. Her case wasn't isolated. She had been known to child protective services and welfare agencies due to previous concerns raised about her safety and well-being. From a young age, Alayna's family life was complicated, and reports to child welfare services had been made in the past, with growing concerns about the environment she was living in. Despite these concerns, Alayna remained within the family home for years, with minimal intervention by the authorities. The failure of the system to properly assess and act on these concerns would ultimately play a role in her tragic disappearance. Alayna's family had a history of involvement with child welfare services. There were previous reports made about her care, as certain aspects of her home life raised alarm bells for those working with her. The system had been called to assess the family dynamics on more than one occasion. These investigations were prompted by things like suspected neglect, poor living conditions, and concerns over the well-being of the children in the household. However, the results of these investigations were not always conclusive enough to warrant immediate or long-term intervention. One of the most significant factors was the family's tendency to move around. There were unstable living conditions at times, which often complicated child welfare cases. Alayna's family had been in and out of different homes over the years, which made it harder for authorities to track long-term patterns of behavior or intervention. Alayna's parents also struggled with substance abuse issues, further complicating her situation. Despite the interventions and assessments by social services and other child welfare agencies, the system failed to provide lasting solutions. The initial concerns raised about Alayna's safety were often dismissed or downplayed, and the authorities, despite having a record of reports, failed to make the necessary changes to keep her protected. Throughout her early years, Alayna was seen by professionals who recognized that something was off about her home life. Teachers, doctors, and other child welfare professionals expressed concern about her physical well-being, her emotional state, and her home environment. In some cases, Alayna showed signs of neglect. She was underfed, undernourished, and at times exhibited unusual behavior for her age. But despite these red flags, Alayna's case did not receive the intervention it required. The child welfare services had limited resources, and there was a lack of coordination between agencies. The assessment of the family's living conditions was often incomplete, and any concerns that were raised were addressed only as isolated incidents. There was no long-term, coordinated strategy in place to address the ongoing risks to Alayna. What made the situation even more tragic is that despite multiple assessments, Alayna's situation wasn't fully understood by those tasked with protecting her. She was seen by the system as just one more case, rather than a child who needed urgent attention. Over time, the system's inconsistent responses to the issues raised about her home life led to the situation being normalized. Alayna's needs were not addressed adequately, and no steps were taken to permanently remove her from an unsafe environment. The moment Alayna Ertl disappeared, many in the community were stunned, but they were not entirely shocked. Alayna had been known to the system for years, yet the intervention came too little, too late. It became painfully clear that despite all the safeguards in place, the system had failed to recognize the gravity of Alayna's situation. This failure wasn't just about missing paperwork or overlooked reports. It was about broken systems that couldn't see the forest for the trees, unable to connect the dots between individual, isolated incidents of neglect. Alayna's case was one of many where the long-term, deep-rooted issues within child welfare systems were laid bare. The family was not always cooperative with authorities, and there was a lack of follow-through on the part of some of the professionals involved. Alayna was not removed from the home, despite evidence that she was not being cared for properly. This raised questions about how child welfare agencies handled families who were already known to them. The questions that have haunted Alayna's case are simple but stark. Why didn't the system intervene earlier? Why didn't anyone connect the dots before her disappearance? Why did Alayna, a child known to the system, remain vulnerable for so long? The case of Alayna Ertl remains a painful example of how systemic failures in child welfare can lead to tragic consequences. Her story continues to raise awareness about the need for better oversight, better communication, and immediate action when it comes to protecting vulnerable children. Alayna should have been protected, but she wasn't, and as a result, her life was cut tragically short. Her case serves as a reminder of the importance of consistent vigilance, accountability, and intervention in child welfare systems. No child should ever slip through the cracks. Alayna's legacy is one of hope for reform, for change, and for a future where no child is left vulnerable to neglect or abuse. The questions still remain, but with those questions comes the need for action, and the hope that future systems will be better equipped to safeguard the lives of children like Alayna. There were inconsistent reports made over the years about the well-being of Alayna and her family situation. Questions surfaced about whether child welfare professionals had missed an opportunity to intervene before the tragedy struck. Alayna's case was not the first time a child had slipped through the cracks. Her case was part of a disturbing pattern: children who were known to the system, but whose cries for help went unanswered. The case had highlighted a broader issue: How children can fall victim to a broken system where bureaucracy, limited resources, and overworked social workers create an environment where problems are not identified until it is too late. The case raised important questions about the responsibility of authorities and the need for intervention when signs of abuse or neglect are present. What was the role of local agencies? Why had Alayna been ignored, and why was there such a delayed response? After the search for Alayna Ertl came up empty and the case began to stagnate, the investigation shifted toward questioning the family and anyone connected to her disappearance. While there were many questions raised by her disappearance, authorities zeroed in on those closest to her, specifically Matt Ertl and Trina Clegg. Both were questioned multiple times by law enforcement, though they were never charged with any involvement in their daughter's disappearance. Still, questions lingered, and the absence of any leads made people question the truth behind the tragedy. One theory that gained traction in the media was family involvement. The speculation about the parents' role became widespread in news reports. With no other solid leads, it seemed natural to investigate the possibility of family members being involved in some way, but no direct evidence or accusations surfaced. Authorities began investigating whether the parents might have known more than they were letting on. Despite interviews, polygraphs, and repeated questioning, the case continued to spin its wheels without making any progress. As time passed, the case was ultimately reclassified as a criminal investigation, but it never gained the traction needed to make concrete progress. Despite widespread media attention, there were still no charges filed for any direct involvement in the disappearance. Investigators continued their work, attempting to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Public opinion was divided. After years of trying to find an explanation, some aspects of the investigation remained frustratingly unresolved. The lack of closure and tangible evidence created an emotional weight on the community, her family, and anyone involved in the search efforts. As time passed, the case of Alayna Ertl remained unsolved. There were no clear answers, no closure for the family. The search for the person responsible for her death continued, and still, no one was held accountable. Authorities continue to seek justice for Alayna, but despite the advances in forensic technology, there has been little progress in solving her case. There have been few suspects, and no one has been charged with her murder. To this day, Alayna Ertl's name continues to stand as a reminder of the tragedy and the failure of the system. What could have been done differently? What went wrong? The tragedy of Alayna Ertl remains a symbol of the vulnerability of children in a world where justice sometimes feels like a distant dream. Thank you for watching Silent Evidence, True Crime Exposed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time for another chilling true story.